At 2:17 a.m., the elevator doors opened on the surgical floor of Street Aurelia Medical Center, and Ava Monroe forgot how to breathe. For one frozen second, she thought the man inside was already dead. He sat slumped against the polished steel wall, one long leg bent unnaturally, one hand pressed to his ribs, where blood seeped between his fingers and stained the white cuff of his shirt black-red. His head hung forward, dark, wet hair falling over a face Ava had only seen on news alerts, courthouse sketches, and the whispered fears of men who thought hospitals had no ears. Cassian Moretti, the Moretti heir. The man half of Chicago feared, and the other half owed money to. And he was dying in her elevator. Ava's coffee slipped from her hand and exploded across the floor. The sound should have snapped him awake. It didn't. The elevator lights flickered once above him, washing his face in a cold, clinical glow. His black suit jacket was torn at the shoulder. His knuckles were split. There was a deep cut along his jaw, and under the blood, under the bruising, under the violence clinging to him like smoke, he was devastatingly alive in a way that made danger feel physical. Ava stepped forward before fear could stop her. "Nurse Monroe," the night security guard called from the end of the hall. "Is everything—" Cassian's eyes opened. Not slowly, not weakly. They snapped open like a weapon being drawn. Dark, furious, focused. Ava froze with one hand reaching toward the emergency button. Cassian's bloody fingers shot up and closed around her wrist. His grip was iron. "No police," he rasped. His voice was shredded, but the command inside it was not. It hit her low in the chest, intimate and terrifying, as if he had not asked her anything. As if the world had always been made to obey him. Ava looked down at his hand around her wrist. Blood smeared over her skin. "You're bleeding out," she said, forcing her voice steady. "Let go of me." His eyes moved over her face, sharp despite the pain. Assessing, distrusting, burning. Then his gaze dropped to the silver cross pinned to her badge. Something changed. It was not softness. It was recognition. Ava felt it like a door opening behind her in the dark. Cassian's grip loosened, but he did not release her. His breathing hitched. Blood bubbled faintly at the corner of his mouth. "They followed me," he whispered. The hall behind Ava went silent. Too silent. Every machine beep, every distant cartwheel, every fluorescent hum seemed to fade under the weight of those 3 words. Ava turned her head. At the far end of the corridor, the security guard was gone. In his place stood 2 men in dark coats. They did not look like visitors. They did not look lost. One of them lifted his hand just enough for Ava to see the gun tucked against his thigh. Her stomach dropped. Cassian saw her see it. His bloody fingers tightened once more, not around her wrist this time, but around the edge of her sleeve. "Close the doors," he said. Ava's pulse roared in her ears. One man started walking toward them, slowly, calmly, like he had all night, like he had killed before, and expected the hospital to make room for him. Ava hit the elevator close button so hard her thumb bent backward. The doors began sliding shut. Too slow. The man raised his gun. Cassian moved faster than a dying man should have been able to move. He dragged Ava down by the sleeve just as the first shot cracked through the corridor. The bullet screamed past her head and shattered the elevator mirror. Glass rained over them. Ava hit the floor on her knees, her breath knocked out, Cassian half collapsing over her as the doors sealed shut with a metallic thud. For 3 seconds there was only their breathing. His blood warm against her scrubs. Her heartbeat hammering against his chest. Then the elevator jolted downward. Ava stared at the emergency panel. None of the buttons were lit. The elevator was moving on its own. Cassian's body went heavier against her. His head dipped near her shoulder, his breath hot and uneven against her neck. Ava shoved a trembling hand against his wound. He flinched, but his eyes stayed locked on hers. "You need surgery," she whispered. His mouth twisted, almost a smile, almost a warning. "No," he said. "I need you." The words made no sense. They still landed like a threat. Ava swallowed hard. "You don't know me." Cassian's gaze dropped again to the silver cross on her badge, then to the name printed beneath it, Ava Monroe. His eyes darkened with something far more dangerous than pain. "I know exactly who you are." The elevator lights went out, and in the darkness, Cassian Moretti whispered the one sentence that turned Ava's entire life into a loaded gun. "Your father didn't die in an accident." The darkness inside the elevator felt colder after Cassian Moretti spoke. "Your father didn't die in an accident." Ava Monroe stared at him, her hand still pressed against his bleeding side, her breath trapped somewhere between fear and disbelief. For 17 years, her father's death had been the one pain she understood. Thomas Monroe had been a paramedic, a good man, a tired man, a man who came home smelling like rain, coffee, and hospital antiseptic. The police had said his ambulance crashed on a wet road during a late-night call. Ava had believed that because she had needed to. Because at 12 years old, a lie was easier to survive than a murder. "Don't say that," she whispered. Cassian's face was pale beneath the emergency red light, but his eyes were still dark, sharp, and terrifyingly awake. "I came here because of him." Ava's throat tightened. "You don't get to use my father to save yourself." "I'm not trying to save myself." Blood soaked through the gauze beneath her fingers. Ava swallowed hard and forced herself back into nurse mode. Pain could wait. Questions could wait. If she didn't stop the bleeding, Cassian would die before he gave her any answers. "Move your hand," she ordered. His mouth tightened, but he obeyed. Ava tore open the elevator emergency kit, packed gauze against the wound, and pressed hard. Cassian's jaw flexed, but he didn't cry out. Even half dead, he looked like a man trained to never show weakness. "You need surgery," she said. "You need to listen. I need you to stop bleeding on my shoes." For a brief second, something almost like amusement moved across his face. Then the elevator shook. Above them, metal scraped. "Ava froze." Cassian looked up. "They're in the shaft," he said. The words sent ice through her spine. Ava looked toward the ceiling hatch, then back at him. The elevator suddenly felt too small, too dark, too full of blood and secrets. A deep voice echoed from above. Cassian Moretti, always dramatic even when dying. Cassian's expression changed. The wounded man vanished. Something colder took his place. Ava whispered, "Who is that?" "My brother." Another heavy strike hit the elevator doors from above. The man laughed softly. "Send the nurse up, Cassian. She has nothing to do with this." "Ava's pulse slammed in her ears." Cassian grabbed her wrist. "Do not answer." "I wasn't planning to." But the voice above continued, almost gentle. "Ava Monroe. Night shift surgical nurse. Lives alone. Mother in Indiana. Still wears her father's silver cross on her badge." Ava stopped breathing. Cassian's grip tightened. The man above knew her name. Her mother. Her cross. Her father. Ava looked down at the small silver cross pinned beside her badge. Her father had given it to her years before he died. He had knelt in front of her on the kitchen floor, placed it in her hand, and said, "One day, when you help people, keep this close." She had worn it through nursing school, through night shifts, through lonely birthdays, through every unpaid bill, every empty apartment dinner, every time she pretended she was fine because no one was coming to rescue her. Her father had been her safest memory. Now, even that memory had a shadow. "What do they want from me?" she asked. Cassian's eyes dropped to the cross. "Your father left something behind." Ava's voice trembled. "My father was a paramedic. He was also collecting evidence." "No." "He found names, payments, police, judges, hospital staff. People who helped my family bury crimes." Ava shook her head, but the denial felt weak. Memories returned in broken flashes. Her father whispering with her mother in the kitchen. Her mother crying when she thought Ava was asleep. A locked drawer Ava had never been allowed to open. The night before he died, her father had hugged her too long. "Whatever happens," he had whispered, "you stay brave." At the time, Ava thought he meant growing up. Now she wasn't sure. A hard crack sounded above them. The upper doors began to bend open. Cassian's face tightened. "We have to move. You can barely stand. Then help me." Ava hated that she did. She hated the way his arm felt heavy around her shoulders, hated the warmth of his blood soaking into her scrubs, hated the dangerous pull of him, the power, the pain, the way he looked at her, as if she had been part of his nightmare long before tonight. They reached for the ceiling hatch. Ava climbed first, fingers slipping against cold metal. Cassian pushed her up despite the wound tearing through him. She heard his breath break, but he didn't stop. When she turned back, his face had gone gray. "Cassian," she said, panic slipping into her voice. His eyes lifted to hers. For the first time, he looked less like a mafia boss and more like a man running out of time. "Pull," he said. Ava grabbed his wrist and pulled with everything she had. He collapsed onto the roof of the elevator beside her, shaking, blood spreading beneath him. Above, a flashlight beam cut through the shaft. There you are, the man called. Cassian grabbed Ava's hand and dragged her toward the maintenance ladder. Down. They climbed into the hospital's basement service corridor, where the air smelled of bleach, concrete, and old machines. Ava forced Cassian behind a row of laundry carts and dropped beside him. He was fading. His lashes lowered, his breathing slowed. "No," Ava said, slapping his cheek lightly. "Stay awake." His eyes opened, furious. "Good." Fury meant alive. "Tell me the truth," she whispered. "Why did my father die?" Cassian looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Because he saved me." Ava's heart stopped. Before she could speak, an old hospital phone on the wall began to ring. Once, twice, 3 times. No one used that line after midnight. Cassian's face changed instantly. "Don't answer it." Ava stood slowly. The phone kept ringing. Cassian reached for her, but he was too weak to stop her. "Abba." She lifted the receiver. Static hissed. Then a trembling voice came through. "Babu?" Ava's blood turned cold. "Mom?" Her mother sobbed softly on the other end. "Listen to me very carefully," she whispered. "Do not trust Cassian Moretti." Ava turned back toward him. Cassian was staring at the phone like it had become a loaded gun. Her mother's voice broke. "He was there the night your father died." Ava kept the phone pressed to her ear, but for a moment she could not speak. "He was there the night your father died." Her mother's words echoed through the basement corridor like a second gunshot. Across from her, Cassian Moretti leaned against the laundry cart, one hand pressed to his bleeding side, his face pale beneath the red emergency light. He did not deny it. That hurt more than anything. Ava's fingers tightened around the receiver. "Cassian," his eyes lifted to hers. "Yes," he said quietly. "I was there." The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. For 17 years, Ava had mourned her father as a victim of rain, bad roads, and cruel timing. Now the man bleeding in front of her, the man she had just helped escape death, was standing inside the memory she had never been allowed to question. "My father saved you?" she whispered. Cassian's jaw tightened. "He tried to." Her mother sobbed through the line. "Thomas found him wounded that night. Cassian was just a boy. Your father pulled him into the ambulance. He said no child deserved to die for his family name." Ava closed her eyes. That sounded like her father. That was what made it unbearable. Cassian's voice came low. "My brother's men came for the ledger. Your father wouldn't give it to them. When he drove away with me in the ambulance, they forced it off the road." Ava opened her eyes slowly. "So my father died because he saved you." Cassian did not look away. "Yes." The honesty struck harder than a lie. Before Ava could answer, a loud crash exploded through the phone. Her mother screamed. Ava's blood turned cold. "Mum." A man's voice came through the line, smooth and calm. "Miss Monroe." Cassian went still. His entire body changed. Not pain now. Rage. "Adrian," he said. The man on the phone laughed softly. "Little brother. Still alive. Disappointing." Ava's stomach twisted. This was him. The brother. The man who had sent gunmen into the hospital. The man who had murdered her father. The man who now had her mother. Ava forced her voice not to break. "Where is she?" "Safe," Adrian said. "For the moment. If you hurt her, you'll what?" His tone sharpened. "Call security. Run to the police. Cry in a basement beside the monster your father died protecting." The words hit exactly where he wanted them to. Cassian took a step forward, but the wound made him stagger. Ava saw it. Adrian wanted her afraid. He wanted her ashamed. He wanted her to feel small. For a second it worked. She was just a nurse in blood-soaked scrubs, trapped beneath a hospital with a dying Mafia boss and no one coming to save her. Then her mother whimpered on the line. Ava straightened. "What do you want?" "The cross." Ava's hand moved instinctively to the small silver cross pinned beside her badge. Her father's cross. The one he had given her before he died. Cassian noticed the movement immediately. His eyes darkened. "Ava, don't." Adrian laughed. "There it is." Thomas was sentimental. Predictable men hide dangerous things inside precious memories. Ava stared down at the cross. All these years, she had thought it was grief. A keepsake. A piece of her father she could carry through night shifts and lonely mornings. Now it felt like a target. "What is it?" she whispered. Cassian's voice was rough. "A key." "To what?" "To the evidence your father died protecting." The basement lights suddenly went out. "Abba, gaspe." Emergency red strips flickered along the floor. Far above them, the hospital intercom crackled. Security lockdown initiated. All elevators disabled. All exits sealed. Cassian cursed under his breath. Adrian's voice softened. "You have 1 hour, Miss Monroe. Bring me the cross, or your mother dies hearing your voice on the phone." The line went dead. For 3 seconds Ava could not move. Then footsteps echoed down the corridor. Slow. Multiple men. Coming closer. Cassian grabbed her wrist and pulled her behind the laundry carts. His hand was cold, but his grip was still firm. Ava crouched beside him, heart hammering. A flashlight beam swept across the wall. One of the men laughed. "Boss said the nurse is alive. Try not to ruin her face." Ava's stomach turned. Another voice answered, closer. "Unless she makes it difficult." Humiliation burned through her fear. They spoke about her like she was cargo. Like her mother was leverage. Like her father's death was just business. Cassian reached beneath his jacket and pulled out a small black pistol. Ava stared at it. "You had a gun this whole time?" "1 bullet. That's not comforting. It isn't meant to be." The footsteps stopped just beyond the laundry carts. A shadow stretched across the floor. Cassian leaned close, his voice barely a whisper. "When I move, you run." Ava looked at him, at the blood spreading through his shirt, at the man who had been tied to her father's death, at the only person in this basement who knew why her life was suddenly worth killing for. "No," she whispered. His eyes flashed. "Ava." She reached for the silver cross on her badge. Cassian grabbed her hand. "Don't expose it. They already know." "Ava. I spent 17 years thinking my father died helpless." Her voice trembled, but it did not break. "He didn't. He died protecting something. And I'm not handing it over because your brother scared me." Cassian stared at her as if he was seeing her for the first time. Then the flashlight beam cut across their hiding place. "There," one of the men snapped. Ava ripped the cross from her badge. The man raised his gun. Cassian lifted his pistol. But before either weapon fired, the silver cross in Ava's fist clicked open. Inside, hidden beneath the tiny metal frame, was a folded strip of microfilm. And written across it in faded black letters were 2 words. Moretti blood. The silver cross clicked open in Ava's fist. For 1 second even the gunman froze. Hidden inside the tiny metal frame was a folded strip of microfilm, so small Ava almost missed the faded words printed across it. Moretti blood. Cassian saw it, and the look on his face told Ava everything. He knew. Her breath caught. "What is this?" The gunman stepped forward, weapon aimed at her chest. "Hand it over." Ava closed her fist around the microfilm. Cassian lifted his pistol. 1 bullet. 1 shot. The blast tore through the basement corridor. The gunman dropped hard against the wall. The second man fired blindly, bullets shredding linen carts and sending white sheets exploding into the air. Cassian grabbed Ava and dragged her down. "Run." This time she obeyed. They stumbled through the service corridor, Cassian bleeding heavily. Ava clutching the cross so tightly its edges cut into her palm. Behind them men shouted. More footsteps pounded closer. Ava shoved open a maintenance door and pulled Cassian into an old supply room filled with broken monitors, rusted gurneys, and forgotten hospital equipment. Cassian slammed the door shut and pushed a metal cabinet in front of it. Ava turned on him, shaking. "What is Moretti blood?" Cassian's face was gray now. His breathing was rough, uneven, but his eyes stayed locked on hers. "Not here." "No." Her voice cracked with rage. "My mother is hostage. My father was murdered. Men are hunting me in my own hospital. You don't get to hide anything anymore." A heavy strike hit the door. The cabinet rattled. Cassian glanced at it, then back at her. "Moretti blood is a record," he said. "A record of what?" His silence chilled her. "Children," he said. Ava stared at him. "What?" Cassian swallowed hard. "My father's empire didn't only move weapons and money. Years ago, private doctors, hospitals, and corrupt officials helped hide births. Children born from affairs, blackmail, secret bloodlines. Names were erased. Identities were changed." Ava felt the room tilt. "No. Your father found the records through a private clinic connected to Street Aurelia. My father was a paramedic. He was also the only good man brave enough to expose them." Another crash hit the door. Wood cracked. Ava looked down at the microfilm in her hand. Her father had carried this secret, protected it, died for it. "Why is it called Moretti blood?" she whispered. Cassian didn't answer fast enough. Her stomach dropped. Cassian. His eyes darkened with something close to regret. The hidden children weren't random, he said. They were Moretti heirs. Ava stepped back. The words moved through her slowly, poisoning every memory. Her father's locked drawer. Her mother crying in the kitchen. The night before he died, when Thomas Monroe hugged her too long and told her to stay brave. Ava shook her head. No, don't. Cassian took one step toward her, then nearly collapsed. Ava caught him on instinct, and for one breath they were too close, his blood on her scrubs, his face inches from hers, his pain mixing with hers. Thomas Monroe loved you, Cassian said. He chose you. He raised you. Ava's eyes burned. Why are you saying it like that? Because she already knew. Some part of her already knew. Cassian's voice dropped. Because he wasn't your biological father. The room went silent. Even the pounding at the door seemed far away. Ava stared at him, waiting for the lie to reveal itself. It didn't. My father was Thomas Monroe, she whispered. Yes, Cassian said fiercely. In every way that mattered. That is not an answer. His jaw tightened. Ava's voice broke. Who am I? Cassian looked like the truth hurt him too. You are Giovanni Moretti's daughter. Ava stopped breathing. Giovanni Moretti, the old Don. The monster behind decades of blood, power, and buried bodies. Cassian's father. Adrian's father. The name struck her like a blade. No, she whispered. No, I'm not one of you. Cassian's eyes hardened, not cruelly, but urgently. That blood is why Adrian wants you dead. The door burst open. 2 men stormed in. Cassian shoved Ava behind him, though he could barely stand. One man lunged for her. Ava grabbed a metal tray from the shelf and swung with everything she had. It smashed across his face. Cassian drove his shoulder into the second man, slamming him into a stack of equipment. The impact tore a brutal sound from his chest, but he didn't fall. Ava yanked the fire suppression lever. White chemical mist blasted from the ceiling. The room vanished in smoke. Men coughed and cursed. Cassian found Ava's hand in the chaos. This time, she let him take it. They ran into another corridor, red emergency lights flashing across the walls. Ava could barely see through the mist. She could barely think. Giovanni Moretti's daughter. Thomas Monroe's daughter. A target. A secret. A bloodline. Then the hospital intercom crackled overhead. Adrian's voice filled the basement. Attention, Street Aurelia staff. We are looking for Nurse Ava Monroe. She is armed, unstable, and responsible for the shooting of a patient in custody. Ava froze. Cassian looked up, fury darkening his face. Adrian continued, calm and cruel. If anyone sees her, do not approach. Call security immediately. Ava's hands trembled. In one night, she had lost her father all over again. Lost her name. Lost her safety. Then Adrian's voice returned, softer now, almost smiling. Careful, little sister. Monsters run in the blood. Adrian's voice died from the intercom, but the words stayed inside Ava like poison. Careful, little sister. Monsters run in the blood. The red emergency lights kept flashing over the basement corridor, turning Cassian's blood black against his shirt, turning Ava's hands into something that looked guilty. For one terrible second, she could not tell if the blood on her skin belonged to him, to the dead gunman behind them, or to the life she had just lost. Giovanni Moretti's daughter. The hidden child. The secret heir. The reason men were now tearing through a hospital to kill her. Ava pressed one hand against the silver cross hidden beneath her scrub top, feeling the broken hinge and the microfilm tucked inside. Only hours ago, that cross had been grief, her father's memory. A small comfort pinned to her badge during long shifts and lonely nights. Now, it was evidence. A weapon. A death sentence. Cassian's hand closed around her wrist. Move. His voice was rough, but the command in it was still absolute. Ava looked at him, anger cutting through her shock. Don't touch me like I belong to you. His eyes darkened. If you belonged to me, you'd be somewhere safe. The words landed too hard. Too intimate. Too dangerous. She pulled her wrist free. There is no safe. Not anymore. Cassian looked down the corridor. Footsteps echoed somewhere behind them, growing closer, organized and calm. Men used to killing did not hurry unless they were afraid. They're sealing the lower exits, he said. Adrian will push us toward the garage. Then we don't go there. We do if we want to leave alive. Ava almost laughed. You mean if I follow you deeper into your world? Cassian turned back to her, His face had gone pale from blood loss, but his presence still filled the corridor like a closed fist. You entered my world the moment your father hid that film inside your cross. No, Ava snapped. My father tried to keep me out of it, and died doing it. The cruelty of the truth silenced her. Cassian's expression shifted, only slightly, but enough for Ava to see he regretted the wound his words had opened. He stepped closer, not softening, not apologizing in the ordinary way, but lowering his voice like a blade laid flat. Thomas Monroe was your father, he said. Not because of blood, because he chose you when men like Giovanni erased people for convenience. Do not let Adrian take that from you. Ava's throat tightened. She hated him for saying the one thing that kept her from falling apart. A distant shout snapped them back. Cassian grabbed the nearest maintenance room door and pulled Ava inside. The room was cramped, windowless, and smelled of bleach, dust, and old rubber tubing. Boxes of surgical drapes lined one wall. Broken 4 poles leaned in a corner like discarded bones. Cassian shut the door and braced himself against it, breathing through pain. Ava saw the tremor in his hand. Not fear. Weakness. Blood had soaked through the makeshift bandage at his ribs. You're going into shock, she said. I'm fine. That sentence should be illegal in hospitals. He tried to move past her. Ava shoved him down onto a metal supply crate. Cassian's eyes flashed. Ava, sit down, Mafia prince, before I let you bleed out for dramatic effect. For 1 second, the air changed. Not calmer, sharper. Cassian stared at her as if no one had ever spoken to him like that and survived. Then, to her surprise, he sat. Ava grabbed surgical drapes, tore them into strips, and knelt in front of him. Her hands moved with practiced urgency, peeling back soaked fabric, packing pressure, binding tight. Cassian's breath hitched once, but he made no sound. She looked up. Does it hurt? His mouth curved faintly. You're hoping it does. I'm hoping pain teaches humility. Then you're wasting medicine. She should not have smiled. She almost did anyway. Then her hands brushed the hard muscle of his abdomen as she tightened the bandage, and the moment turned electric in a way neither of them had permission to feel. Cassian's gaze dropped to her mouth. Ava froze. Outside the door, men were hunting them. Her mother was hostage. Her father's past had exploded into blood and lies. Cassian was wounded, dangerous, tied to everything that had ruined her family. And still, for one traitorous heartbeat, Ava felt the pull of him. Not romance. Not trust. Something darker. The terrible gravity of a man who looked at her like he would destroy anyone who touched her, even if he had no right to protect her. She stood too quickly. Don't look at me like that. Cassian's voice lowered. Like what? Like I'm something you found. His expression hardened. You are something Adrian lost. That's worse. No, he said, that is power. Ava stared at him. I don't want power. You don't have to want it for men to kill over it. Before she could answer, voices moved past the door. Ava's body went still. Cassian rose silently, ignoring the wound. He guided her back behind a shelf, placing himself between her and the door. The movement was instinctive, possessive, infuriatingly protective. A radio crackled outside. South wing clear. Still searching for Monroe. Another voice answered. New order from Moretti. The nurse stays alive. Ava's blood chilled. One of the men laughed softly. Which Moretti? A pause. Then the reply came. Both. Cassian went rigid. Ava turned slowly toward him. Both. Adrian wanted her alive for the cross, for the evidence, for leverage. But Cassian? Her voice dropped. Why do you want me alive, Cassian? His eyes stayed on the door. Bad question. Answer it. The men outside moved away, their footsteps fading into the corridor. Cassian waited until silence returned. Then he looked at her. Because if you die, Adrian wins. Ava's laugh was bitter. That's not protection. That's strategy. In my world, survival starts as strategy. And ends as what? His stare deepened. Obsession if you're careless. The room went silent. Ava felt the word crawl under her skin. Obsession. It should have sounded like a threat. From Cassian, it sounded like a confession he had not meant to give. She stepped back. I'm not a trophy in your family war. No, he said. You're the match. The match? The one thing that can burn Giovanni's empire from the inside. Adrian knows it. Matteo knows it. Every loyalist who ever questioned my brother will know it once that film is decoded. Ava touched the hidden cross. What does the film prove? That Giovanni Moretti had a daughter erased from the official bloodline. That Thomas Monroe protected her. That Adrian murdered him to keep her buried. Ava swallowed hard. And what happens if the family believes it? Cassian's eyes turned colder. Adrian loses legitimacy. And you gain it. He did not answer. That silence cut deeper than a lie. Ava nodded slowly, pain turning to anger. So I am useful to you. Cassian stepped closer. Yes. The honesty struck her hard. Then he continued. But useful is not the same as disposable. Ava looked up at him. His face was pale, his shirt soaked, his body barely standing, but the force in his eyes pinned her in place. If I wanted to use you, I would have taken the cross the moment it opened, he said. If I wanted a throne, I would have delivered you to the men waiting below and called it mercy. But I came to your hospital bleeding because your father saved my life, and I owe him more than a grave. Ava's anger faltered. Cassian's voice dropped further. And because the second you looked at me in that elevator like I was a man instead of a monster, I made a mistake. What mistake? I cared whether you survived. The words hit too softly. That made them worse. Ava looked away before he could see how badly they landed. His phone vibrated. Cassian pulled it from his jacket. The screen was cracked, smeared with blood. A message glowed across it. Lower garage. 5 minutes. Come with the girl, or Adrian gets her mother in pieces. Sender, Matteo. Ava's stomach dropped. Who is Matteo? Cassian stared at the message too long. My second. Can we trust him? Pause. 3 hours ago, I would have trusted him with my life. And now? Cassian's jaw tightened. Now your life matters more. Ava hated the way that made her chest ache. We get my mother, she said. We will. No. Not after your Mafia meeting. Not after your men decide whether I'm valuable enough to keep breathing. Now. Cassian stepped close, and the room seemed to shrink around him. If you run toward Adrian, he will use your mother's voice to make you surrender. Then he'll take the cross, kill her anyway, and put you on display as proof that Giovanni's mistakes die quietly. Ava's face drained. Cassian softened only in tone, not in truth. I will not let that happen. You keep saying that like it's a promise. It is. You're dying. Then I'll make it count. For a second, Ava saw past the suit, the blood, the command, the Moretti name. She saw the boy her father had pulled into an ambulance. The boy who had survived while Thomas Monroe died. The man who had built himself into something terrifying because softness had once cost someone else everything. Understanding him felt dangerous. So she hardened herself against it. Fine, she whispered. We go to the garage. But if your people touch me, if they try to take this cross, if they use my mother... Cassian's eyes burned into hers. They won't. You don't control everyone. No, he said, but I control what they fear. They slipped out of the storage room and moved through the old radiology wing. The hospital above them had become a theater of lies. Every few minutes, Adrian's voice came through the speakers, calm and polished, naming Ava Monroe armed, unstable, dangerous. Each time, Ava flinched. Each time, Cassian noticed. At the stairwell, they found the dead security guard. Ava rushed to him before thinking. She checked his pulse, already knowing from the angle of his body, from the stillness, from the blood beneath his collar. Nothing. Her hand lingered at his neck. He held the door for me yesterday, she whispered. Cassian stood behind her, silent. He asked if I wanted the last vending machine cinnamon roll, she said. I said no. I don't even know his name. Cassian's voice was low. This is Adrian's work. Ava looked up at him, cold tears burning her eyes. No, this is your world. He took the blow without defending himself. Maybe because it was true. They descended toward the lower garage. The air grew colder. The sound of engines vibrated through the concrete. Ava could smell rainwater and exhaust before they reached the door. Cassian paused with one hand on the handle. Once we go through, he said, you stop being only Ava Monroe. She placed her hand over the cross beneath her scrubs. That ended when your brother called me little sister. Then she opened the door. White headlights flooded the garage. Black SUVs stood in rows like predators. Men in dark suits surrounded them, weapons low but ready. Rainwater dripped from their coats onto the concrete floor. At the center stood an older man with silver at his temples and a gun in his hand. Matteo. His gaze moved first to Cassian's wound, then to Ava. Slowly, he lowered his head. Not to Cassian. To her. Miss Monroe, Matteo said. Thomas told me I would know you by the cross. Ava stopped breathing. Cassian went still beside her. Matteo raised his gun, but not at Ava. At Cassian. I'm sorry, he said. And every man in the garage raised their weapons. Matteo's gun stayed pointed at Cassian's chest. For one impossible second, Ava heard nothing but the engines humming in the underground garage and the rainwater dripping from the black SUVs onto the concrete floor. Cassian stood beside her, pale, bleeding, and frighteningly still. A dozen weapons aimed at him. Not at her. At him. Ava's hand tightened over the silver cross beneath her scrubs. What is this? Matteo's eyes did not leave Cassian. A correction. Cassian's voice was low. Lower your weapon. For the first time since Ava had met him, the command did not work. Matteo did not move. Neither did the men behind him. That scared her more than the guns. Matteo looked older under the garage lights, his face carved with grief and years of violence. I followed your father. I protected you. I killed for you. His jaw tightened. But I made a promise before I ever swore to the Morettis. Cassian's eyes darkened. To Thomas Monroe. Ava stopped breathing. Matteo finally looked at her. Your father saved more than Cassian that night, he said. He saved you from becoming Giovanni's final weapon. Cassian took one step forward. Every gun clicked sharper. Ava raised her hand. Stop. Cassian froze. Not because Matteo ordered him. Because she did. The realization flashed across the garage like lightning. The men saw it. Matteo saw it. Cassian saw it too. And something unreadable moved through his eyes. Ava looked at Matteo. If you knew my father, tell me why you're pointing a gun at the man trying to keep me alive. Matteo's expression turned grim. Because Cassian has not told you the worst part. Ava's stomach dropped. Cassian's face hardened. Matteo. No, Ava said, turning to him. No more protecting me with half-truths. Cassian stared at her, blood soaking through the fresh bandage beneath his shirt. Matteo spoke before he could. Giovanni Moretti did not simply hide your birth. He signed your life away. Ava went cold. What does that mean? Matteo reached into his coat and pulled out a folded document sealed in plastic. He held it up but did not step closer. A blood contract, he said. Old family law. Illegal in courts, sacred in criminal houses. Giovanni promised his hidden daughter to whichever son controlled the family after his death. Ava felt the garage tilt. No. Matteo's eyes softened with pity. You were never meant to grow up free, Miss Monroe. You were meant to be revealed when useful, claimed when necessary, married into power if the family fractured. Ava looked at Cassian. His silence destroyed her. You knew? Cassian's jaw tightened. I found out tonight. When? In Adrian's vault. Before or after you came to my hospital? Cassian did not answer fast enough. Ava stepped back. His hand lifted slightly, then stopped. Ava. No. Her voice shook. You knew there was some contract tying me to your family, and you didn't tell me. I came to destroy it. But you didn't tell me. His eyes burned with frustration and something dangerously close to desperation. Because you were already bleeding from enough truths. Ava laughed once, hollow and furious. That is not your decision. Matteo lowered the document slowly. Thomas knew Giovanni intended to use you. That is why he stole the ledger. That is why he hid the proof inside your cross. He was not only exposing crimes, he was breaking your claim before the Morettis could use it. Ava's hand went to the cross again. Her father's gift. Her father's warning. Her father's last act of love. Ava swallowed hard. What does the contract say? Matteo's voice dropped. That if Giovanni's sons turned against each other, the hidden daughter's bloodline could decide succession. The men in the garage shifted. Ava suddenly understood. This was not only about killing her, it was about owning her. Adrian wanted her alive because she could legitimize him. Cassian wanted her alive because she could destroy Adrian. And every man in this garage was looking at her like she was no longer a nurse. She was a crown covered in blood. Ava's voice turned cold. I am not choosing a Mafia king. Cassian's eyes locked on hers. Good. Matteo looked at him sharply. Cassian stepped forward despite the guns. That was never the plan. Matteo's hand tightened around his weapon. Then why did Adrian's men receive an order with your seal? Ava froze. Cassian's expression changed. What order? Matteo nodded to one of his men. The man held up a phone and pressed play. Cassian's voice filled the garage. Bring Ava Monroe alive. Secure the cross. Kill anyone who interferes, including her mother if necessary. Ava's blood turned to ice. The recording ended. Silence followed. Cassian looked as if someone had driven a blade between his ribs. That is not me. Ava wanted to believe him. That terrified her. Matteo's voice was hard. Voice print matches. Command code matches. Your seal matches. Cassian's eyes cut toward the SUVs, toward the men, toward every exit. Then the truth hit him. Adrian has my command key. Matteo's face did not change. Convenient. Cassian's voice became lethal. He took it when he staged the ambush. And we are supposed to trust that? Matteo asked. You disappear for 3 hours, come back bleeding with Giovanni's hidden daughter, and suddenly an order appears demanding her capture under your authority? Ava stepped away from Cassian. Just one step. But Cassian saw it. Pain moved through his face faster than he could hide it. Ava. She hated that it hurt to doubt him. She hated that every part of this world was designed to make truth look like betrayal. Tell me you didn't do it, she whispered. I didn't. Tell me you didn't come to my hospital because you needed my bloodline. I came because Adrian would kill you. That's not the same thing. Cassian moved toward her. Matteo raised his gun higher. Do not. Cassian ignored him. Ava stepped back again. Cassian, stop. This time, he stopped. The garage doors behind them began to open. Everyone turned. Cold rain blew inward across the concrete. A line of black vehicles rolled into view outside. Not Matteo's SUVs. Different plates. Different men. A slow clap echoed from the entrance. Adrian Moretti walked into the garage under the rain, dressed in a black coat, perfectly dry beneath an umbrella held by one of his guards. He smiled. Touching, he said. Really? Betrayal has such a beautiful sound in enclosed spaces. Every gun in the garage shifted. Some toward Adrian. Some toward Cassian. Some toward Ava. Adrian looked at her, his smile widening. My little sister looks disappointed. Good. That means she's learning. Cassian's voice dropped into murder. Where is her mother? Adrian sighed. Safe enough to scream. Ava lunged forward, but Cassian caught her arm. This time, she did not pull away. Adrian noticed. His smile sharpened. Oh, Cassian. Already possessive? Father would be ashamed. Or amused. Hard to tell. He did love ruining women and calling it legacy. Matteo aimed at Adrian. You forged Cassian's order. Adrian's eyes flicked to him. Of course I did. Ava stared. The confession came too easily. Adrian continued, relaxed and cruel. I needed Matteo to doubt him. I needed Cassian wounded. I needed Ava afraid. And most importantly, I needed all loyalists gathered in one place. Cassian's eyes narrowed. Ava felt the air change. Adrian lifted one hand. High above the garage, red dots appeared across the walls. Laser sights. Dozens. Ava looked up. Men lined the upper levels. Snipers. Matteo's face went pale. Adrian's voice softened. The old families always had one weakness. They loved dramatic meetings. Cassian pulled Ava behind him. Matteo barked an order, but it was too late. The first shot cracked through the garage. One of Matteo's men dropped. Then chaos exploded. Gunfire erupted from above. Glass shattered. SUV alarms screamed. Men dove behind doors and concrete pillars. Ava hit the ground as Cassian covered her with his body, pain tearing through him as he shielded her from falling glass. For one breath his mouth was near her ear. Stay under me. She should have hated the command. Instead she heard the blood in his voice and realized he was using the last of his strength to keep bullets from finding her. Matteo fired upward. His men scattered. Adrian walked calmly backward under his umbrella as the garage became a battlefield. Then his voice rang through a speaker system. Ava Monroe, listen carefully. Cassian's body went rigid above her. Adrian continued, your mother is alive. But she remains alive only if you come with me. Ava's heart stopped. A large screen inside one SUV flickered on. Her mother appeared, tied to a chair in a dim room, bruised but breathing. Ava's cry broke from her chest. Mom. Her mother lifted her head weakly. Ava, don't. A guard struck her across the face. Ava screamed. Cassian grabbed her before she could rise. Adrian's voice hardened. 1 minute. Give me the cross, and come willingly, or she dies. Ava looked at Cassian. His face was pale with blood loss and rage, his hand trembling around her arm. Mateo crawled toward them behind a concrete divider, blood on his temple. There's another way out, he shouted over the gunfire. Old ambulance tunnel. Cassian looked at Ava. We can reach it. My mother. We save her after we survive this. Ava stared at the screen. Her mother bleeding. Her father's cross against her skin. Cassian's blood on her hands. Adrian's men closing in. Then the bigger truth landed with brutal clarity. Adrian did not need only the cross. He needed Ava to choose fear. To walk into the cage herself. Ava pulled the cross from beneath her scrubs. Cassian's eyes flashed. No. Ava opened the broken frame and removed the microfilm. Then she shoved the empty cross into Cassian's hand. What are you doing? Her voice shook, but her eyes did not, making him chase the wrong thing. Before Cassian could stop her, Ava slipped the microfilm into the bloody bandage at his ribs and pressed hard. He stared at her. For the first time, Cassian Moretti looked completely undone. Ava leaned close, her voice barely audible beneath the gunfire. My father trusted you once. Prove he wasn't wrong. Then she stood. Cassian grabbed for her, but his strength failed. Ava stepped out from behind the SUV with the empty silver cross raised in her hand. Adrian's voice purred through the speakers. Smart girl. Ava looked at him through the smoke, the bullets, the rain, and the wreckage of the life she used to have. No, she whispered. Then louder. I'm a Monroe. And before Adrian could answer, Ava threw the empty cross into the fire suppression drain at the center of the garage. Adrian's smile vanished. Cassian's eyes widened. The drain swallowed the cross into darkness. And every gun in the garage turned toward Ava. Every gun in the garage turned toward Ava. For one breath, the entire world held still. Rain hissed against the open garage entrance. Smoke curled beneath the concrete ceiling. SUV alarms screamed somewhere in the chaos, sharp and endless, while red laser sights trembled across Ava's scrubs like tiny wounds of light. Adrian's smile disappeared. That was the first time Ava felt powerful. Not safe. Never safe. But powerful. Because for 1 second, every violent man in that garage understood the same thing. She had not obeyed. She had not begged. She had not handed over her father's cross like a frightened girl trading memory for mercy. She had thrown it into darkness. Adrian's voice cut through the speakers, low and murderous. Get here. Cassian moved before the first man fired. He slammed into Ava from the side, dragging her behind the black SUV as bullets ripped through the air where her body had been. The windshield shattered above them. Glass burst outward in a glittering storm. Ava hit the concrete hard, Cassian landing over her with a sound of pain so raw it tore through her anger. He had no strength left. And still he had shielded her. Are you insane? He snarled, blood dripping from his mouth. Ava shoved at his shoulder. You're welcome. You threw the cross away. It was empty. His eyes flashed. Then he understood. His hand went to the blood-soaked bandage at his ribs, where Ava had hidden the microfilm. For half a second, even in the middle of gunfire, Cassian looked at her as if she had become something he had not expected. Not a nurse. Not a victim. A player. Then a bullet punched through the SUV door inches above his head. Cassian dropped lower, covering her again. Stay down. No. No. Ava. I'm done staying down. She grabbed a fallen security baton from the floor and crawled toward the back tire. Cassian cursed behind her and dragged himself after her, refusing to let distance open between them. Across the garage, Mateo's men returned fire. Muzzle flashes lit the concrete in violent bursts. Men shouted in Italian. Tires exploded. Headlights shattered. The upper level erupted with sniper fire. Red dots slicing through smoke like hunting eyes. Mateo ducked behind a concrete pillar, blood running from his temple. Ambulance tunnel, he shouted. Now! Cassian looked toward the far end of the garage. A rusted metal door marked medical transport access sat half-hidden behind a row of old equipment carts. Between them and that door stood Adrian's men. Too many. Too armed. Too ready. Adrian's voice came through the speakers again, calm now, almost amused. Ava, darling, you have 40 seconds before my man gets bored with your mother. The SUV screen flickered. Her mother appeared again. Bruised. Breathing. Terrified. A guard stood behind her with one hand on her shoulder and a gun near her head. Ava's entire body went cold. "Ava!" her mother cried through the screen. "Don't come to him." The guard struck her again. Ava screamed and rose without thinking. Cassian caught her around the waist and dragged her back down as bullets tore across the hood. "Let me go." "No. He has her, and he will kill you both if you run blind." Ava turned on him, wild with panic. "Then give me a better choice." Cassian's face hardened. Not with cruelty. With decision. He reached into his coat, pulled out a small black device, and pressed it into Matteo's hand as the older man slid behind the SUV. Matteo stared at it. "Cassian, do it." Matteo's expression changed. "That will expose everything." "Good." Ava looked between them. "Expose what?" Cassian's eyes stayed on Matteo. "All of it." Matteo nodded once, grimly, then crawled toward the nearest SUV console. Cassian turned back to Ava. "Your father didn't only hide evidence in your cross. He sent duplicates to people he trusted. Matteo was one of them." Ava's breath caught. "He had the ledger. Parts of it. And you didn't say that?" "I didn't know if Matteo had survived long enough to keep it." Ava looked toward the older man, who was now connecting the device to the SUV's communication system under a rain of bullets. Adrian noticed. His voice sharpened through the speakers. "Matteo, don't be stupid." Matteo looked up at the camera mounted in the corner of the garage. Then he smiled without warmth. "For Thomas," he said. He hit transmit. Every screen in the garage flickered. The SUV monitors changed first. Then the security screens. Then the overhead emergency display. Names appeared. Police officials. Judges. Hospital administrators. Private clinics. Shell companies. Payments. Deaths ruled accidental. Children erased from birth records. And at the center of the file, one name repeated again and again. Adrian Moretti. The gunfire faltered. Just for a second. But it was enough. Men who had been shooting at Cassian looked up at the screens. Some lowered their weapons in confusion. Others turned toward Adrian's entrance. Adrian's calm finally cracked. "Kill Matteo." A sniper fired. Cassian saw it first. He shoved Ava behind the SUV and lunged toward Matteo, but he was too slow. The bullet struck Matteo in the shoulder, spinning him hard against the console. Ava moved on instinct. She ran. Cassian shouted her name, but she was already crossing open ground under gunfire, sliding behind the SUV beside Matteo and pressing both hands to the wound. Matteo gasped, blood spreading beneath his coat. "Pressure," Ava said, her nurse voice cutting through the chaos. "Look at me. Stay with me." Matteo gave a broken laugh. "Thomas said you'd be bossy." Ava's eyes burned. "He knew me when I was 12. He knew enough." Cassian reached them, half falling behind the SUV, rage and fear tearing across his face. "Ava, never run into open fire again." She glared at him while keeping pressure on Matteo's wound. "Then stop getting shot around me." Matteo coughed, then grabbed Ava's wrist with surprising strength. "Listen," he said, "the tunnel doesn't lead outside." Cassian froze. "What?" "It leads to the old ambulance bay under Street Mercy Chapel." Ava stared. "A chapelle?" Matteo nodded weakly. "Thomas hid the final file there. Not in the cross. Not with me. The cross only opens the vault." Cassian's jaw tightened. "What vault?" Matteo looked at Ava. "Your father's." Ava's heart slammed once. Then the lights in the garage went out. For one terrifying second, there was only blackness, gunfire, and screaming. Then emergency strobes exploded red. Adrian's men surged forward. Cassian grabbed Ava with one arm and Matteo with the other, dragging them behind the SUV as bullets tore through the metal. He was bleeding worse now, barely upright, running on rage alone. "We move," he said. Matteo shook his head. "I'll slow you down." Cassian's voice turned deadly. "I didn't ask." Ava ripped a strip from Matteo's shirt, tied a fast compression wrap around his shoulder, then looked toward the ambulance tunnel door. 20 yards. It might as well have been a mile. Adrian stood near the garage entrance, no longer smiling. Rain blew around him. His men regrouped behind him, weapons raised. His eyes locked on Ava. Not Cassian. "Ava, you think blood makes you brave?" Adrian called. Ava stood slowly behind the SUV, visible just enough for him to see her face. "No," she shouted back. "My father did." Adrian's expression darkened. Cassian looked at her like the words had struck him somewhere deeper than the wound. Then Adrian raised his hand. The snipers shifted. Cassian moved instantly. Now. Mateo's loyalists opened fire upward, forcing the snipers back. Cassian pulled Ava across the garage, his body between her and the bullets. Mateo staggered beside them, supported by one of his men. Everything became motion. Glass under Ava's shoes. Smoke in her throat. Cassian's hand crushing hers. Men falling. Engines roaring. Rainwater mixing with blood across the concrete. A guard lunged from behind a pillar and grabbed Ava by the hair. Pain exploded across her scalp. Cassian turned with a sound that was not human. He hit the man so hard they both slammed into the SUV. The guard raised a knife. Ava saw the blade flash and drove her elbow backward into his throat. He choked. Cassian took the knife, twisted his wrist and dropped him. Then Cassian staggered. Ava caught him before he fell. For 1 second, his forehead dropped against hers. "You should have run," he breathed. "I did. Not toward me." Ava looked at him through smoke and red light. "I'm still deciding if that was a mistake." His mouth almost curved. Then another bullet struck the wall beside them. They reached the ambulance tunnel door. Locked. Of course it was locked. Cassian slammed his shoulder into it once. Nothing. Again. The wound tore open further. Blood ran down his side. Ava grabbed his arm. "Stop." Mateo stumbled forward, pulling a key card from beneath his shirt. "Thomas gave me this too." The scanner beeped. Creen. The door opened with a heavy groan. Cold tunnel air rushed out, smelling of mildew, stone, and old rain. Ava turned back once. Adrian was moving toward them now, furious, surrounded by armed men. Above him, the screens still flashed evidence of his crimes. But his eyes were only on her. "You can't run from blood," he shouted. Ava touched the cross-shaped mark, still pressed into her palm, where the metal had cut her. Then she looked at Cassian. "I'm not running from blood." She stepped into the tunnel. "I'm running toward the truth." Cassian followed, dragging the door shut behind them as bullets slammed into the metal. The lock sparked. The tunnel plunged into darkness. For several seconds they only ran. Ava's lungs burned. Cassian's grip weakened. Mateo stumbled behind them with 2 men supporting him. The tunnel stretched endlessly ahead, lit only by emergency bulbs flickering along the ceiling. Then Cassian slowed. Too much. Ava turned just as his knees hit the wet stone floor. "Cassian." She dropped beside him. His face had gone white. The bandage at his ribs was soaked through completely. The microfilm was hidden there, pressed beneath blood and fabric, the proof of her life beating against his wound. He looked up at her, trying to speak. Ava put both hands on his face. "No. Stay with me." His eyes locked on hers, darker than the tunnel around them. "Chapel," he whispered. "Get to the chapel." "We?" His hand covered hers. "Ava." "No," she said, fierce and shaking. "Do not give me a deathbed command in a sewer tunnel." That almost made him smile. Then a sound echoed from behind them. Metal grinding. The garage door opening again. Adrian's men had breached the tunnel. Mateo lifted his gun with his uninjured arm. Ava looked down at Cassian. He could not run. Not anymore. And behind them, footsteps began moving through the dark. Slow. Certain. Coming closer. Top of form. Bottom of form. The footsteps came closer through the dark tunnel. Ava knelt beside Cassian, both hands pressed against his bleeding wound. His face had gone dangerously pale, his breath shallow, his body too heavy against the wet stone floor. "Go," he rasped. Ava stared at him. For 1 second, she was 12 again, holding her father's silver cross, waiting for someone stronger to save her. Then something inside her hardened. "No." Cassian's eyes struggled to focus. "Ava, my father didn't die so I could keep running." Behind them, Mateo lifted his gun with one shaking hand. "They're almost here." Ava looked around the tunnel. Old pipes, flickering emergency lights, water along the floor. Then she saw the rusted yellow valve on the wall. Fire suppression line. Her nurse's mind snapped into focus. Pressure. Timing. Visibility. Fear. She took Mateo's gun. Cassian's eyes sharpened. "Ava, don't." She looked down at him, no longer afraid of the world that had stolen her life. "You said I was the match," she whispered. "Then watch me burn." Ava fired into the overhead pipe. For half a second, nothing happened. Then freezing water exploded through the tunnel, blasting Adrian's men as they rounded the corner. They slipped, shouted, and lost their aim as flashlights spun wildly across the walls. Ava turned the yellow valve. The pressure doubled. "Move!" she shouted. Mateo and one of his men dragged Cassian toward the end of the tunnel, while Ava walked backward, gun raised. She fired into the lights, plunging half the tunnel into darkness. For the first time, Adrian's men sounded afraid. Not of Cassian, of her. They reached the old chapel entrance beneath Street Mercy. Mateo shoved the door open, and cold air rushed out from a forgotten crypt beneath the church. Inside, candles flickered against stone walls. Dust covered broken pews. A marble statue watched over the room like it had been waiting for this night. Ava dropped beside Cassian and ripped open his bandage. The microfilm slid free, slick with blood. For 1 second she held it in her hand. Her father's truth. Her mother's life. Cassian's survival. Her own name. Then she placed it in Mateo's palm. "Decode it." Mateo stared at her. "You trust me?" "No," Ava said. "But my father did." That was enough. Mateo moved to the altar, pushed aside a loose marble tile, and revealed a hidden lockbox built into the stone. Ava turned back to Cassian. "You are not dying here." His mouth barely moved. "Bossy, still your nurse." She packed his wound again, tied pressure with torn cloth, and forced herself not to panic when his pulse stayed weak. Behind her, the lockbox clicked open. Inside were files, birth records, hospital logs, bank transfers, photographs, and a video drive labeled in Thomas Monroe's handwriting. "For Ava, when they come." Ava's breath broke. Mateo connected the drive to a small screen. The image flickered. Then Thomas Monroe appeared, alive, younger, sitting in the back of an ambulance. Ava covered her mouth. Her father looked straight into the camera. "If you're watching this, sweetheart, then I failed to keep the darkness away from you." Tears filled Ava's eyes. Cassian's weak fingers found hers. Thomas continued, voice steady but full of love. "You are my daughter. Blood is biology. Love is choice. And I chose you every day." Ava cried silently. On the screen, her father leaned closer. "Giovanni Moretti was your biological father. He never deserved you. Adrian will try to use you. Cassian may try to save you. But don't mistake protection for ownership. You belong to yourself." Ava looked down at Cassian. He heard it. And for once, he did not look offended. He looked humbled. Thomas's voice hardened. "Inside this vault is everything needed to destroy Adrian's claim. But Ava, listen carefully. Do not become their weapon. Become their reckoning." The video ended. Silence filled the chapel. Then Ava stood. The terrified nurse who had opened the elevator was gone. In her place stood a woman covered in blood, holding her father's truth, ready to make an empire kneel. Mateo lowered his head. "What do you want us to do, Miss Monroe?" Ava looked at the files, then at Cassian, then toward the tunnel, where Adrian's men were coming again. Her voice was calm. "Broadcast it." Mateo blinked. "To who?" "Everyone." Cassian's eyes lifted to hers. Ava continued. "Every loyalist, every police contact, every hospital name on that list, every enemy Adrian has. If he wants me public, let's make the truth public first." Mateo's men moved fast, connecting devices and sending the files through old encrypted channels Thomas had prepared years ago. Names appeared on screens. Payments. Deaths ruled accidental. Hidden children. Forged orders. Adrian's crimes. Thomas Monroe's video. Everything began spreading. Then the chapel doors burst open. Adrian entered first, rain on his black coat, armed men behind him. His eyes went to the screens. Then to Ava. "You stupid girl," he whispered. Ava raised Mateo's gun. Her hands were steady now. "No," she said. "Your mistake was thinking I'd want your blood more than my father's name." Adrian's face twisted. "Thomas Monroe stole you. Thomas Monroe saved me. He made you weak." Ava stepped forward. "The truth made me dangerous." Every phone in the chapel began vibrating. Adrian's men looked down. One by one, their faces changed. The files had reached them. The blood contract. The erased heirs. The murder order. The hospital network. Everything. Adrian panicked. "Shoot her." No one moved. "I said shoot her." Still nothing. Then one of his men lowered his gun. Then another. Then another. Ava stood before them in blood-soaked scrubs. No crown, no throne. No fear left big enough to control her. Adrian drew his own gun. Ava fired first. The bullet struck his hand. His weapon clattered across the chapel floor. Adrian screamed and dropped to one knee. Ava walked toward him slowly. Every man watched. No one stopped her. "You think this ends with me?" Adrian spat. Ava crouched in front of him. "No," she said softly. "It starts with you." Then she looked at Matteo. "Call every family." Matteo nodded. Cassian forced himself upright against the altar, one hand on his wound, his eyes locked on Ava. Not with possession. With respect. For the first time, Ava did not feel trapped in his shadow. He was standing in hers. Sirens wailed faintly outside. Black cars began arriving in the rain, one after another. The old families were coming. Ava stepped beside Cassian. Bloodied nurse. Dying Mafia boss. Monroe truth. Moretti fire. Together they faced the chapel doors. And as the first men entered, every head lowered. Not to Cassian. To Ava. The first men entered Street Mercy Chapel without raising their guns. Rain clung to their black coats. Their faces were hard, silent, trained by years of violence and loyalty. But their eyes moved past Adrian on the floor, past Matteo near the altar, past Cassian barely standing with blood soaking his bandage. They looked at Ava. Blood-soaked scrubs. Thomas Monroe's truth behind her. Giovanni Moretti's blood inside her. No fear left in her eyes. One by one, the men lowered their heads. Not to Cassian. To her. Adrian laughed bitterly from the floor. "She's nothing." Ava turned to him. "No," she said softly, "I was nothing to you. That's different." Cassian's knees weakened. Ava caught him before he fell. For once he didn't fight her. The terrifying Mafia boss from the elevator was still there. But beneath the blood and power, Ava finally saw the wounded boy her father had saved. "Get him help," she told Matteo. Matteo nodded. "Already coming." Minutes later, the chapel filled with controlled motion. Adrian was restrained. The tunnel was secured. A doctor loyal to Matteo rushed in and dropped beside Cassian. When the doctor tried to move Ava away, Cassian's bloody fingers closed weakly around her wrist. "No," he rasped. Ava looked down at him. "Still giving orders?" His eyes found hers. "Only one." "What?" "Stai." The word landed differently this time. Not as control. As a request. Ava swallowed hard. "I'm here." Cassian's eyes closed for a second, as if her answer was the only thing keeping him alive. By dawn, the rain had stopped. Thomas Monroe's files were already spreading through Chicago, reaching prosecutors, reporters, rival families, and every corrupt name that had believed the dead could keep secrets. Adrian had been taken away by men who no longer obeyed him. And Ava's mother was found alive, bruised, terrified, breathing. When Ava heard her voice through Matteo's phone, she broke. "Mom?" Her mother sobbed. "Baby." Ava pressed the phone to her forehead and cried silently, while Cassian watched from the chapel steps, pale, bandaged, and alive. Later, outside the chapel, the city looked gray and quiet beneath the morning light. Cassian sat in the back of a black SUV, one hand pressed to his ribs. "You should go to your mother," he said. "I will." "Good." Ava studied him. "And you?" A faint smile touched his mouth. "I'll try not to die before you yell at me again." Despite everything, Ava laughed. Small. Exhausted. Real. Then she pulled the broken silver cross from her pocket. Matteo's men had recovered it from the drain after the fight. It was bent, scratched, and empty now. But still hers. "For 17 years I thought this was all I had left of my father," she said. Cassian looked at it. It was. Ava shook her head. "No, he left me more than this." She looked back at the chapel where Thomas Monroe's truth had destroyed an empire. "He left me a choice." Cassian's eyes lifted to hers. Ava stepped closer. "I'm not joining your world, Cassian. I know. I'm not becoming a Moretti queen. I know. I'm not yours." His gaze held hers, dark and steady. "No," he said quietly. "You're yours." The words settled into the bruised places of her heart. For the first time, Cassian did not sound like a man trying to possess her. He sounded like a man learning how to stand beside her. Ava placed the broken cross in his hand. "What is this?" he asked. "A reminder." "Of what?" "That my father saved you once." Her voice softened. "Now spend the rest of your life becoming the kind of man worth saving." Cassian stared at the cross. For a moment the violence left his face. Only grief remained, and something dangerously close to hope. Ava turned to leave. Ava, he called. She stopped. Cassian's voice was quieter now. When you come back. He paused. The old Cassian would have commanded. This, Cassian corrected himself. If you come back. Ava smiled faintly. Survive surgery first. His mouth curved. Yes, nurse. Ava walked into the pale morning light. Behind her, the Moretti Empire was burning. Ahead of her, her mother was alive. Her father's name was no longer buried. And somewhere between blood, truth, and the elevator doors that had opened at 2:17 a.m., Ava Monroe stopped being the secret men tried to erase. She became the woman they would remember. And inside the chapel, Cassian Moretti held the broken silver cross against his chest like a vow. Not of ownership, not of power, but of redemption.